Everyone, my name is Heather. I'm the manager of the international department here at Sault College. Um, and I'm happy to welcome you to this. And we are joined by Elizabeth Long and Mary McDonald from LM Law Group. Is that the correct name
Right,
there?
that's the new name.
There's
Yep.
been a rebrand, yes. So they're here to help give you some information. The session is being recorded, so if you have any friends or classmates who registered but were not able to attend because they have classes or work, that's okay. We'll make sure that you have access to the recording afterward as well. So I'll ask, please, if you have questions, first please listen, and then if you have questions, please put them in the question and answer box. And we'll do our best to try to help get at least the common themes answered. But with that, I'll pass it over to Elizabeth and Mary to take over.
Well, thank you so much, Heather. It's always great to be here with you guys. There has been so many changes just in the past 6 months. And we wanted to share with you some of the rules that pertain not only to getting permanent residence, but also what's going on right now with you as students. Okay, so let's get going. You guys are looking at the right screen, right? You guys see the right screen?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Okay. All right. Let's start with temporary residence. So the rules for studying and working on your study permit. Now, you still have to actively pursue your studies. Okay. Actively pursuing your studies means you're enrolled as a full-time student, you're doing your exams, you're going to classes. If you are not actively pursuing your studies, you drop out and you lose your status 90 days after you drop out. Okay. Now, there are two exceptions to the rules. One is the scheduled breaks. These are the breaks that are on the academic calendar, like your summer breaks, winter breaks, spring breaks, all of these breaks. That is fine. You're still considered actively pursuing your studies if you're on a scheduled break. The other exception to the rule is your authorized leaves. These are leaves which are personal to you. Let's say that you have a situation where you're not able to enroll yourself as a student in that semester. Well, what you should do at that time is go and talk to Heather or Jessica or any of the fantastic people in the international student office and let them know what your situation is. If the school provides you with authorized leave before you go on leave, they say, okay, we're going to give you authorized leave, and you can get authorized leave for 1 semester at a time. Okay. And if you do that, then you are able to continue with your status. You're not able to work while you are on authorized leave, and we'll talk about that in a bit, but you have status. You don't lose your status then. Now, once you are, if you are enrolled as a full-time student, you can work, but you can only work if you're enrolled as a full-time student, except in the last semester when you can be a part-time student. Okay, you can work on scheduled breaks as well. You can work full-time on scheduled breaks. And when you are completing your studies, though, you are no longer a student at that time, and you have to now stop working. Okay, the only exception to the rule is if you're in between programs. So if you've been accepted to a new program and you have just finished a program, let's say you finished your program in April, and then you have been accepted to a new program for September, you can work for the summer in between those programs. But other than that, once you've received notice that you've completed your program, you have to stop working at that time. You cannot continue to work if you're not on authorized leave, you're not on a scheduled break, once you've received the first notice from the school that you've completed your program.
Okay. Another very important thing is to maintain your status while you're studying in Canada. So what that means is looking at the deadline, the expiry date on your study permit, and applying for an extension if you need it. If your study permit is going to expire before your program ends, then you definitely need to apply to extend your study permit. And you get what's called implied status. So what that means is if you apply for an extension before your study permit expires, as long as you submit the application properly, then you get to continue studying on the same status as your old permit until a decision is made on your new study permit. So you can continue studying until they make a decision on your study permit extension application. You do need to make sure that you apply properly. So you need to submit the correct fees and the correct forms. And then one other thing you need to be aware of is the restoration timeline. So if your study permit has expired, then you have 90 days from the day of expiry to submit an application for restoration and get your status back. That 90-day deadline is very, very strict though, so you want to pay close attention to it. If it's been more than 90 days since your study permit expired, then you don't have, you're not within the restoration period. If you apply to extend your study permit and you get a refusal on the extension, then it's 90 days from the day of that refusal. If you apply to extend your study permit, but they return the application because say you missed an important form or the fees, then your timeline, your 90-day timeline goes back to the day of your study permit expiry. So you just want to be very careful with restoration deadlines and also just to make sure you do maintain your status while you're studying.
Okay, let's talk about the post-grad work permits. Now, most of you likely qualify for a post-grad work permit because you would have, if you're graduating or, if you applied, as long as you applied for your study permit before November 1st, it's the old rules where once you graduate, depending on the length of the program, if it's 2 years or more, you get 3-year work permit. If it's a 1 year, you get a 1-year work permit. Now, the new rules for field of study for non-degree programs did come into place on November 1st of last year. That means that if you've completed a program and you want to go and apply for a new program, that new program, if you haven't submitted your study permit before November 1st, would be subject to the field of study. So there's only now certain fields where you are able to apply for a postgrad work permit. So it's very important when you're deciding whether or not you're going to apply for a postgrad work permit to understand what applies to you. And if you're not going to, you want to do a new program, whether or not you're going to be able to get a postgrad work permit for your new program. Okay. Other things you have to be aware of, distance education. You cannot do more than 50% of your program as distance education. You should be less than 50% should be distance education to get your postgrad work permit. Full-time status at school is very important as well. Like I said, full-time student, you can't work unless you're a full-time student. But for post-grad, it's very important. If you have not maintained a full-time student status in every semester except in the last semester, or when you're on authorized leave, okay, where you took the entire semester off, then you likely wouldn't be able to get a post-grad work permit. Okay, so a lot of times, sometimes people say, oh, you know what, I'm experiencing some difficulty for this one semester. Is it okay if I just drop the courses? I'd rather just maintain a really good grade point average, GPA, and instead of having a low grade, or I might fail this one course. But if you drop that 1 or 2 courses and you go down to a part-time school, you may have to do a whole other program in order to qualify for the postgrad work permit. I would rather see an F on a course where someone has F, but they otherwise maintain their full-time student status than for someone to have dropped the course, not have it show up in the transcript, and the transcript shows that they were a part-time student. Okay. And then finally, you can work full-time as soon as you apply for your postgrad work permit, if your study permit is still valid and if you apply within 90 days of the completion of your program. Now, some people will say, Elizabeth, on the IRCC website, it says I can apply for postgrad work permit within 180 days of my completion. Why are you saying 90 days? Well, the 90 days is because we will want you to be able to work while waiting for your work permit. And in order to do so, the rules require that you hold status, student status. And because your student status expires after 90 days after you finish your completion of your program, even if your study permit is valid for over 90 days, you will not be able to work until you get your new work permit. Because especially now, flagpoling, you're not allowed to flagpole as well, okay? So that's the rule. Apply while your study permit is still valid and if it's within 90 days of the completion of your program. So just quickly, let's go over a timeline to apply for the working at the end of the program. First of all, if you are writing your final exams, you're still a student, full-time student, you can work, okay? You're waiting for your results. Yeah, you have, nobody's told you that you completed your program, so you're still a student. Great, you can work. Now, the school has told you, congratulations, you've completed your program. Can you work? No, you cannot work. You have to stop working at that time. Okay. Now, if you submit your postgrad work permit within the deadline of what? 90 days, or when your study permit is still valid, whichever comes first, then you can start working full-time at that time.
Okay, so these are some new changes that came in actually just yesterday, some of them. And they do impact how spouses can accompany you while you're studying or you're working in Canada. So what the rules are now. So students, you can only bring your spouse on an accompanying open spousal work permit if you're studying in a master's program that's at least 16 months long, a PhD, or within a select professional program, for example, like a bachelor's of nursing or a dentistry program, something like that. If you're working here in Canada, so say you even have a postgrad work permit that you're applying for, your spouse will only be eligible for a work permit to accompany you to Canada if you have a job in a tier 0 or 1 position, or if you have a job within a posted list of select tier 2 and 3 occupations, which IRCC published yesterday. There's a very long list. I can't read all of the knocks out that are on there, but you go and check and see if you're on that list. And then if you are, and you have 16 months left on your work permit, then you can qualify. Your spouse can get an open spousal work permit to accompany you and work while you're also working in Canada. There are exceptions. So if you are able to qualify for a work permit under one of the free trade agreements, or if you're transitioning into PR and you're applying for a bridging open work permit, then your spouse is also able to get a work permit that way. For current work permit holders, so students, so if you have a spouse who's here on a spousal work permit right now, they can apply to extend their work permit for the length of your study permit, of your existing study permit. So say if they were issued a permit that was not the same length as yours due to their passport expiry, then they can go ahead and get an extension to the same duration as yours. Same thing for if you have a work permit and your spouse is currently here on a work permit, then your spouse can apply to extend their work permit to the same duration of your work permit.
Okay, so now let's move on to permanent residence. Mary, over to you.
Sure. So one thing that's really important to understand and touches on even what I was just speaking about is understanding high-skilled versus low-skilled work. So the government of Canada has divided all of the different jobs into what are called National Occupation Codes or NOC codes. And those codes are divided into 6 tiers. So when you're looking at your NOC code, if your tier is 0, 1, 2, or 3, then the job is considered high skilled. And if it's tier 4 or 5, it's considered low skilled. The reason that's so important to know is that many programs require you to have high skilled work. And as I just touched on, even qualifying for your spouse to get an accompanying spousal work permit, you need a tier 0 or a 1 position or one of the 2 or 3 that they've listed. The way that you determine your NOC is it's not about the title of your job. So it's actually about what you do on a day-to-day basis. And on the government website, they list out all of the duties of that NOC code, and it needs to match what you do every day. So even if your job title says that you're the CEO of a company, but if you are, doing the job of actually, say, a janitor, then you're actually a janitor, not a CEO, and vice versa. So make sure you pay attention to what your duties are every day, because sometimes people just rely on the job title and that would be incorrect. You also want to pay close attention to the mandatory employment requirements. So under the NOC, they also list what the education level is, whether training's required or anything like that. And you need to make sure that you actually have those qualifications if you're going to be claiming that NOC code. On the slide, we also list a link to the actual website so you can look for yourself. In this area, we see people, relying on what their friends have done in the past or what they read online. You actually need to be pretty careful and look for yourself and make sure you do meet the requirements of your own NOC, because the system does tend to change, and it's a very important aspect of a future PR application or a work permit application.
All right, let's move on to express entry. What do you need to know about express entry? Well, first of all, the system that most people know is undergoing a lot of different changes. Express entry remains one of the most used and the most well-known systems. But because we now have so many people in the pool, the points have been pushed up. And there's been changes. There was just some changes announced, which we will get into before Christmas, and certain things. So it's really important to, keep apprised of all the news that's coming out. Now, all of you who have registered for today's session, we will be putting you into our newsletter list so that we can let you know about important changes that do happen as well. Okay. So express entry, first of all, how does it work? Well, to be able to participate in an express entry, you have to create an online profile. You get to create an online profile if you qualify under one of 3 categories: Federal Skilled Worker class, Canadian Experience class, or Federal Skilled Trades class. And when you create an online profile, you get to be entered into express entry pool. Now, just because you've entered into the pool, does that mean that you have applied for permanent residence? No, you have not applied for permanent residence when you have entered the pool, okay? When you've entered the pool, all it is showing the government that you're interested in applying and that you may qualify, and that you create then a points. You're in the system, and the system generates a points from the answers that you have put in there, okay? And so depends, it varies, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, the government normally has a draw where they invite people to apply. And this invitation can be based on your points. It's certainly based on your points, almost always based on your points. It can be based on the category in which you entered, and it can be based on whether or not you have provincial nominee program. And finally, there are category-based draws. Okay, so let's first talk about how you can enter the program. There are 3 categories. The Federal Skilled Worker class is the traditional one where people from outside of the country or even people from inside the country can apply. The work experience, especially for this, is very different from the Canadian Experience class. It's 1 year of high-skilled work experience where you have that's continuous, and you have been working for at least the whole 1 year period. You can be self-employed. You can work while you study. It doesn't have to be in Canada. Okay, so that's just to get into the pool. It's not to be invited to apply per se, but it's to get into the pool. Beyond that, they look at your language score, your education background, etc., and then we come up with a Federal Skilled Worker score. Okay, you also have to have financial savings for this. Now, the second category, and this is the one that the government has been inviting most of the time, people this year and last year as well, is called the Canadian Experience class. And the work experience for this is very different from the federal skilled worker class. The work experience for this is you have to have 1 year of high skilled work experience while you are not a full-time student. Okay. And it has to be in Canada. It has to be high skilled. You cannot be self-employed. You have to be employed with a Canadian employer. Okay, a Canadian employer means an employer in Canada. It could be a foreign company that has a division in Canada, and you're working on payroll in Canada. Okay. So this has to be when you are not a full-time student. Your spouses, for example, on open work permits can get this. You, when you graduate, can also get the work experience as well. Okay. And then we have the skilled trades. They haven't had a draw for skilled trades for years, so I'm not going to get into that one. Okay, but most of the time we're looking at the Canadian Experience class. Now these are the categories just to get into the program. What is it? How does your points calculate in order to get that invitation to apply and get out of the pool? Well, here are some of the points. First of all, your age. Once you reach your 30th birthday, every year your points do drop. 40th birthday, it's a fast drop, -10, -11 points. So there's not too much you can do about age except apply when you can. Don't wait, on this situation. Education, when you have 2 programs, post-secondary programs, where one of the programs is at least 3-year program, then your points do jump. So if you already have a bachelor's degree from outside of Canada, and then you come and you do your program with Sault Ste. Marie, in Sault Ste. Marie with Sault College, then your points will certainly jump. Your language score is very, very important. Normally, right now, with the points being so high, we're looking at scores of CLB 9s for each and every category for your skill level, which in IELTS is 7s in reading, writing, and speaking, and 8 in listening, or CELPIPS, it will be 9s, at least that amount these days, okay? Then with regard to your Canadian work experience. Now, this is the work experience that is similar to what I said for the Canadian Experience class. Okay, the only difference is Canadian Experience class, we only count within 3 years of application. And with this, we can count within 10 years of application. Foreign work experience is also very important. So we look at if you have high skilled work experience outside of Canada that we can prove, then you at least 1 year is one category, and then it jumps for another category for 3 years. Spouse, if we look at their education, their language score, and the Canadian work experience. And provincial nominee programs. And we'll talk about that as well. Now, the provincial nominee programs, it's not all provincial nominee programs that is going to give you 600 points for express entry. It has to be an express entry linked provincial nominee program. And if you've studied in Canada with Sault College, for example, you can get your points there. Arranged employment points. Now, this is a big announcement that the current minister made just before Christmas, where they said that they're going to pause arranged employment points in the spring of this year. Now, are they actually going to do it? Well, maybe, maybe not. Right afterwards this year, as most of you probably know, the Prime Minister said that he was going to step down and that there is going to likely be an election called in March. When that happens, likely, there may not be enough time to announce the arranged employment pause in the spring of this year by this minister. He may be replaced very shortly after. So we will see what happens with that. For now, arranged employment is still available for those who have LMIAs or employer-specific work permits. And you also have to have job offers as well that are at least around a year and a half in length. Okay. If you have brothers, sisters who are Canadians or permanent residents in Canada, you get some points. Fluency of French is very, very big. If you are fluent in French, please let us know. We may right now be able to help you get your permanent residence. But the Conservatives, if they come in, they are not too big a proponent like the Liberals on French. And so could very well be that many of the benefits that French speakers have right now under the system may be reversed. So the thing with immigration these days is if you can take advantage of the current program and you can apply, do it ASAP. Okay. And then finally, trade certification is for the trades like Red Seal certification. All right, so category-based draws, how do they work? Well, the government had announced several categories. There's the French language proficiency, and then the others are the occupations. And I put a link here so you can see what these are, okay? And every month or so, there might be a draw for one of these sort of category-based draws. It just depends. And when that happens, only the people who fall under these categories are invited to apply. And as such, the points do drop significantly if it's for that category. So if you belong to one of these categories, or you think you might, then certainly, come and see us and we can see if you might be able to have a better chance to be invited to apply for express entry.
Okay, so so there are also other ways to gain extra points in express entry, as Elizabeth mentioned, through the OINP or the provincial nominee programs. So this program, the Ontario Provincial Nominee Program, is called OINP, and they have certain programs that are directly linked to the express entry system. So to qualify for these express entry linked programs, you need to have a profile that's valid in the express entry pool. And then Ontario is able to look at the express entry pool and see if there's anybody in the pool that they want to give an advantage to and give 600 extra points to. And so only if Ontario chooses you, then they can send you what's called a notification of interest. And then you give them your documents. And then if they approve it, they give you 600 extra points towards your CRS score. So the categories that they've said they're going to be giving these 600 extra points to, there's a few different ones. There's the human capital stream. So to qualify for that, you need to have a bachelor's degree or higher, which can be from outside of Canada or inside of Canada. They also have said that they're specifying certain candidates that they're interested in. So sometimes they've done this in tech, sometimes they might do it in healthcare. This one, it's whatever Ontario wants to give invitations for, that's who they're reaching out to for the human capital stream, as long as you do have a bachelor's degree or higher. The next one is French speaking. So this one also requires a bachelor's degree, and as well, you need to have a level of CLB 7 in French and a 6 in English. And you need to be in the express entry pool. If you're in that, then you can get a draw through the French speaking program. The next one is the skilled trades. So if you're in the express entry pool and you have at least 1 year of work experience in Ontario within the last 2 years, in one of the trades that Ontario has specified, then you could get a notification of interest. For this one, you don't need a bachelor's degree, but you do need to have a valid work permit and you need to have that 1 year of work experience. So aside from those, so those streams are all the ones that are linked through express entry. They give you 600 extra points to your CRS score. There are also other OINP streams that do not link to your express entry. They do not give you CRS points. You go and get your PR through a different pathway through these streams. So these streams, you have to register for them directly on the OINP portal, and you get a certain number of points. So it's calculated differently. And one thing that's really great for people who are at Sault College, you get extra points for being in locations outside of the Greater Toronto area. So if you're up in Sault Ste. Marie, you can get a lot of extra points through the expression of interest programs through OINP. And so it depends on where you're going, your sort of background information. You're going to get a certain number of points. You're in the pool, and then you're waiting for Ontario to do a specific draw for your program. So Ontario doesn't say when they're going to do their draws beforehand. So you do want to get yourself into the pool if you qualify under one of these streams really as soon as possible. Sometimes they only do one draw a year in a general category, and then they do specific employment draws for the rest of the year. So do get into the pool if you do qualify as soon as possible. I'll go through a little bit about what each of those programs are. So the first kind of category under the OINP expression of interest are employer-based jobs. So for these programs, you need to have a job offer from an employer who's been in business in Ontario for at least 3 years. If it's inside of the GTA, they need to show that their gross income in the last fiscal year was 1 million and that they have 5 full-time Canadian or PR employees. And then if they're outside of the GTA, they need to have 500,000 in income, 3 full-time Canadian or PR employees. The job offer has to be for full-time permanent work. It can't have an end date in your contract. And then there's 3 streams that require a job offer. So the first is the international student stream. So this is a stream for people who have just graduated from a program in Ontario, like you. If you're finishing your program soon, think about qualifying for this stream if you get a job offer. So the job offer has to meet those requirements that I listed above. You need to have completed your program of study in Ontario within the last 2 years. So you need to apply within 2 years of graduation. And you need to have graduated from an eligible program. So that means you've either done a 2-year degree or diploma in Ontario or a 1-year college program that grants an Ontario graduate certificate. Aside from the qualifying education, you also need a high-skilled job offer that's full-time, and you need to be paid at least the low wage. That's one of the programs where you do get extra points if you graduate from a school in Sault Ste. Marie, such as Sault College. So do take a look at this if you get a full-time permanent job offer after you graduate. Next one is skilled worker. So for this one, you need a job offer that meets those requirements above. You also need 2 years of work experience within the last 5 years in the same occupation as your job offer. The work experience doesn't have to have been inside of Canada, though. It can be from outside. The work has to be high skilled, and you have to be offered the median wage for your region, for your hourly salary. There are no education requirements for the skilled worker stream. And then there's also the in-demand job stream. So OINP has a list of specific occupations where they're trying to get people to apply through the stream. And it's a very specific list, so you have to go check what the list is. If you have a job offer in that list, then you could potentially qualify. You need 9 months of experience in Ontario in that same occupation, but it can be with a different employer than the one who's offering you a job through OINP. You need to make the median wage for that occupation. And this is one of the streams that allows low-skilled work to qualify. So even if, for example, say your spouse is working in a position that's listed on that list, do take a look for them as well, so that it can be a good option.
All right. So the federal government recently announced the rules just before Christmas for the new rural community and immigration pilot. And basically, Sault Ste. Marie should be one of the communities that are participating in this. I don't see the rules out yet, but anticipating that the community will put that out soon. Okay, so the rules for the new RCIP program is very similar to those for the RNIP program that was in place before. Essentially, you need to have 1 year of work experience in the last 3 years. Or if you have graduated in a 2-year program, and you were present in the community for 16 months prior to your graduation, as long as you have that, then you don't need the 1 year of work experience. The work experience that they do want to see cannot be self-employed. And the tiers, though, it's not by occupation. You don't have to have the exact occupation, but it's by the tier level. Then there's a language requirement. I don't think any of you guys will have any issues with passing since you're going to college here. You do have to have a high school education. Now, again, it could be you or maybe it's your spouse who is going to apply for this as well. And the funds, you need to have at least half of the LICO amount, which is the amount that the government calculates that people should have in order to settle in Canada. But if you're working in Canada, you're exempt from having those savings. And the community selection process, which is essentially the main selection, that's to be done by the community, and you'll need to have a job offer in the community. And what the exact criteria will be for Sault Ste. Marie is to be announced. But, this program gives you guys an advantage, a big, big, huge advantage over 99% of other people who are in Canada. So make sure that you do take a look at this. If you do have a job in Sault Ste. Marie, let us know, and we can see if, especially once the new program comes out, is announced for Sault Ste. Marie, whether or not we can apply for permanent residence for you. All right, so we've talked a lot about different kinds of programs, and we just kind of wanted to recap some of the strategies as to what you should do if maybe your points are not high enough for express entry.
So the first thing you want to do is seek advice on how you can raise your points. So we meet with people every day to talk about what they can do to improve their CRS score for express entry. Some of the common things that we talk about would be increasing your work experience inside and outside of Canada. So sometimes people have lots of Canadian work experience, but they don't have overseas work experience. And that can actually give you sometimes up to 50 extra points. So it's something to definitely think about in your plan. Otherwise, increasing language scores. These days, you really need to have, CLB 9s to have a good competitive express entry score. So if you're not scoring there on your language test, we normally recommend, keep trying until you can score, or you're really making sure you're getting every point you can under your language test. Increasing your education, so that can be a good way to increase your score as well. If you can get arranged employment, as Elizabeth mentioned, we're not sure what's going to happen with those extra points. Maybe they'll stick around. If you have an opportunity to get into the pool now with arranged employment, that's a great way to, boost your score while we do still have those points. Getting work experience under the category-based draws. So if you work in healthcare in one of the specified areas, if you work in one of the category-based knocks, or if you have French experience, then you could benefit from one of the category draws that IRCC does. Increasing your French points. This is huge right now. If you get a CLB 7 in your French test, then you can get 50 extra points to your CRS score and then also qualify for the French draws. Also qualifying under one of the P&P based programs. So that's maybe you work in an area that OINP is specified for the express entry link draws, or maybe you can go through OINP itself, or RCIP, which Elizabeth was just discussing.
Yeah, so as Mary has said, let's look at some of the other alternatives. Express entry is not the end all and be all for permanent residence in Canada. There are a lot of other programs where you may qualify for. So come and we can take a look at, whatever is out there or whatever may be coming as well in the future.
Next is try to keep in status. So you want to get as long as you can on your postgrad work permit to give you enough time to get PR before it expires. Think about if you could extend your postgrad work permit. Maybe you work with an employer who can give you a closed work permit, and then also team up with your spouse. So remember, your spouse, if they get PR, then you get PR through them. So maybe they qualify under one of these programs. So do come talk to us about it, and we can see if that's a way for you to increase your chances for PR.
And finally, plan some more. And at this time, it's hard to plan because things are changing all of the time. And we really need to understand not only what is currently in place, but what may be coming down the pipeline, what we've heard rumors of, what the minister has announced. and what new political parties may be coming up with as well. It's certainly something where it's not a definite situation, and oftentimes we have to have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and we need to pivot. But one of the things that you also need to think about is if you qualify now, don't think that you're going to qualify a month down the road. So if you can get in and don't waste time as well. All right. So we're going to go on to the questions, but what we talk about here is really just general information for you to get a proper advice for your own situation. Don't just ask your friends, what did you do? Okay, because every situation is different and times change. Make sure that you come and we can have a consultation with you. We do offer Sault College students a discounted consultation fee of only $100 plus tax, and everything is on video conference, so you don't have to come to Toronto, and we can really go through a good plan for you guys. All right, so Mary, let's go through these questions. By the way, guys, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A button on your screen, okay? So we have two questions right now. Mary, do they need to do IELTS to apply for the postgrad work permit?
So as of November 1st, you do need to provide a language test. It doesn't specifically have to be the IELTS. It can be. You can also do the CELPIP or the PTE. But yes, you do need to submit that with your postgrad work permit application.
Okay.
Sorry,
And
can I
then-
just confirm on that? Because we have some students who have been asking, can they take the IELTS academic or does it have to be the IELTS general?
It's the IELTS general.
Thank you.
Okay. And then, so if someone has a 1-year postgrad program, is it too risky to expect to immigrate with only 1 year postgrad work permit?
Listen, it's not necessarily an answer that I can just give you right off the bat like this. We really need to understand what your situation is. Sometimes, if you qualify right now under the current program, maybe you should apply and take advantage before they cancel the program. Other times, maybe you don't qualify yet and you need more time. Can you even get a longer postgrad work permit? Maybe if you have the 1 year, but you can't get into a program in that field of study where you can get a postgrad work permit, then you will lose out on your chance to even get a 1 year postgrad work permit if you do another program. So we really do need to understand what the circumstances for you are before we can give you proper advice and give you a proper plan on that. Okay, but it's a very good question, certainly, to have in your mind. All right, so wow, we're done with all the questions today.
Yeah, there were only 2. That's short.
Fantastic.
We'll
I
do
guess
the
you
last
guys
call.
all,
If you're
I guess
typing,
you are
click
so
send.
good. You guys know I got no questions. We answered all your questions, right? Or maybe people are too traumatized about the situations and need to process a little bit.
Oh, there's another question.
Oh, one more
A
question.
question
Okay.
about a knock.
Yes.
33102.
You know what? I think this is a very specific question about a specific knock. Do come and we can certainly answer whatever questions you have about your occupation. Okay.
Yes. So thank you, Elizabeth and Mary, for your time today. And certainly students, maybe I'll ask one more time if you can confirm how they might reach you if they wanted to set up time.
Yes, so it was on that website, but the best way is to email us at inquiries@lmlawgroup.com, and we'll certainly send out these slides to you, and a recording will be made. But yeah, email, it's the best way. You can call us as well, 416-548-9101, but do tell us you're coming from Sault College so we can give you that discount.
So thank you both very much for your time. We will send out the recording. And I know I see some people kind of trying to throw in some last minute questions. Unfortunately, I do think we might need to wrap up. But please feel free, especially if you have cases, like case specific questions for yourself, feel free to reach out, set up an appointment for advice.
Thanks so much, Heather. Thank you guys. All the best. Stay warm. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.